In this tutorial, we will go over making local adjustments. So at this point, we've converted the photo to black and white, and we've made some basic and tone curve adjustments to the overall image to make the image either a little darker or a little lighter, and to increase contrast in specific areas. Like for this photo, we darkened some of these gray tones and we lightened up some gray in the sky. And at this point, I'm going to make some adjustments to smaller areas of the photo that we can't do with the global adjustment tools like tone curve, which changes the overall image. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the surf along the edge, and in my original photo, so let's take a look at before we made any adjustments to this photo. And we've got the surf, which is bright. Our eyes tend to go to the brightest point first. And I like that this is a leading line into the photo that brings us to the action, which is the little girl running down the beach. Now she has the sunset behind her, which is also bright, so that also helps to draw us to her. But I want to balance this bright point with some brightness over here. So I'm going to think about a couple of things. I'm going to think about how can I lighten this surf line, but then also this area that reflects back the sunset in pink. In the photo, the color is gone, so this becomes a gray spot. And it is like a mirror. It is reflecting back a lot of light. So I'm also going to adjust this to, again, balance this brightness over here with some brightness over here. It will become sort of like a frame around the little girl running down the beach. And then finally, we're going to make some adjustments to the sand to create a little more texture and detail in that area. So let's go back to our full image, and we're going to apply an adjustment brush. So if we go to the menu on the right, all the way above the basic menu, we have some icons here, and the one all the way to the right is a circle, and that is our mask tool. So if we click on that, we get some options for creating a mask. This is creating a selection of part of the photo that we can adjust. And I'm going to just select the brush so that I can free draw the mask that I want. So I'm going to click on that brush, and then you'll see that I have a brush icon. It looks like a circle. And I can actually make this brush larger or smaller to fit the area that I'm going to adjust. So in this case, it's the surf right here. I like to use the bracket keys. You can use the slider over here to make the brush larger and smaller, but I like to place the brush over the area I'm painting and size it to that. So the bracket keys, which are to the right of the letter P on your keyboard, the left bracket will make your brush smaller, the right bracket will make the brush larger. So I'll just make that the size of the surf area that I'm going to adjust, and I'm just going to start to paint. And you'll notice that it starts to paint a red mask over the surface of the image. This is just a guide to show me where I am applying that mask to for an adjustment. So I could see that I need to make my brush a little smaller as the surf recedes away in the photo. And so I'm just brushing in. Now if I go outside the lines by accident, so I can see that with my mask, I've painted into the sky a little bit. I can make the brush an eraser by holding down the Alt key option if you're on a Mac, and that will minus out what I just painted. So if I've got a little too much mask painted in there, just holding down that Alt or Option key and painting away or erasing away the areas you don't want to adjust. Okay, so this is now showing me that I have that white surf selected so that I can do that adjustment that I want to just to the surf. I am going to turn off this red mask because I need to see what's underneath it to do my adjustment. So the way I do that is if I come over to the right here, I have this mask menu that pops out when I select my brush, and this little checkbox that says when you mouse over it, show or hide the mask of the selected pin. I can click that and it turns off the mask. And then I can go down into the adjustment area that is specifically for that mask I just painted on. And I'm going to use the exposure. And I'm going to just start brightening up the exposure. You notice it's only affecting the area that I painted a mask over. And so I want to make the exposure just a little bit brighter
I want to make that surf bright. There's a point where it's going to be too far. Like right now, this is starting to look unnatural, like white has been painted over here. This is a photograph. I do want it to be kind of photorealistic. So I'm going to just bring down that exposure a little bit to just about there. And then I'm going to adjust the contrast. So the exposure makes everything brighter. The contrast makes the light areas lighter and the dark areas darker. So I'm going to bump up that contrast a little bit. And then I'm also going to change the clarity. So the clarity slider, I'm going to grab that and turn that up. That turns up the contrast in just the midtones. So it gives me sort of a textural look. And then if I want to see a before and after, I can, in this adjustment box that opened up with the mask adjustment, there is a toggle switch down at the bottom, and I can turn that the mask on or off to see a before and an after. So I think that looks pretty good. Maybe it's a little bit bright, so maybe I'll go back and adjust the exposure a little bit. Now when I use that toggle switch, it does turn the mask off. So if I mouse back over this area, you see I have this little pin. I can click on it, turns my mask back on, and now I can go back to my exposure slider and maybe just back off a little bit to about there, and I'll look at my adjustment again. So just a subtle little change, but just a nice bright pop of light coming off that surf. Our eyes do go to that brightest point first, so just brightening that up a little bit to make us more aware of the shimmer of the sun reflecting off the surf. Now I also have this area where it's sort of a mirror to the sky, this area that in the original was pink and shining back and reflecting back a lot of brightness in the sky. I want to brighten that up a little bit as well, so I'm going to do a second mask over that section to adjust it. I am going to zoom in a little bit, so if I do Control Command on a Mac plus, that allows me to go into the scene, and then if I hold down my space bar, I've got a hand that allows me to scroll through and kind of move around to get closer to this space here. And I'm going to add a new mask just to this area. So if I come back up to the right side where I've got my mask menu, I can hit plus. I can add another brushed on mask, and I've got my brush over here, which I can make larger and smaller using the bracket keys. And then I can just start painting in that sort of mirrored area on the surf that I want it to lighten. This brush is a little bit big. I've kind of gone a little too far, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key. Again, that's Option if you're on a Mac. And I'm going to just erase away. Maybe that brush is a little big, so I'm going to use the bracket keys to make it smaller. And just got up a little bit on the dunes there. I've got to erase that away. And then I will click that checkbox to turn off my mask. And I'm just going to start to brighten up that surf a little bit. So you can see I can go really extreme so we can see how it's getting brighter. But I think I just want to give it a little bit of a shine so that it's very clearly reflecting back that bright sun in the sky. So you can see a before and after. This is turning on and off both of the masks that I just applied, the one to the surf and the one to the sand. If I wanted to just go back and look at just this area and what I had changed there, I could just go to my history menu and I can back things up through the steps there. So I can go back to that change. And I like that. It just gives it a little bit of pop of brightness. And so now I can zoom out and look at the image again. There's two ways to do this. I can do Control, Command on a Mac, minus, or I can go up to the upper left corner in the navigator and I can just click on Fit, and it'll fit the image back to the size of my screen. And now my final adjustment here, I've mentioned the brightness on the sand here in the last tutorial, how there's, you know, just a little bit of texture happening in here, and I'm just going to take a little bit of artistic license here, and I'm going to just add a little bit more of a pop and a shine to that sand and maybe bring out a little texture. It's going to be very subtle. And because this is an organic area, I'm not following the perfect line of the surf. I can be a little more liberal with the way I paint on my mask. So again, I'm going to go back to this mask tool up here, hit the plus sign. I'm going to select a brush. I'm going to make the brush bigger so I can kind of just start painting at random. Maybe I want to just create some lines in the sand here. Maybe that's a little too thick. Maybe I'll hold down the Alt key and start to erase away a little bit. And make sure I got up a little bit on the grass here, a little bit on her foot. I don't want to lighten that. Okay, and again I'm going to click the checkbox, and then I'm just going to just lightly lighten up the sand, so not too much. Just lighten it up to give a little bit of contrast, a little bit of sheen. That is too much, I don't like that. Maybe about there. Maybe I'll add a little contrast. Maybe I'll bring up the clarity a bit. Actually, I'm not a fan of the way the clarity or contrast looks, so I'll just play with that exposure a little bit. All right, and let's see what we have with that. So we've got just a little bit, turn off that mask, just a little bit of shine on the sand. Okay, great. And then once this is done, I can just click the done to save everything. If I want it at any point to go back and adjust any of those masks that I added, I could just go back to the mask tool. I can click on any one of these masks and I can edit depending on the one that I'm adjusting. So like this one, if I wanted to go back and adjust it, I could easily do that.
So at this point, you basically have a complete image. We've gone through our decisions to convert to black and white, to darken or brighten specific tones with the tone curve, and then to do local adjustments so that we are setting the stage for the viewer. We are leading them to the most important piece of action, and we are conveying the mood of the moment that we want them to experience through our adjustments. And once you get to this point, you have a completely edited photograph.